Now, when President Ramaphosa delivers the Thuma Mina, the Thuma Mina State of the Nation Address, SONA, in February 2018, it was widely seen as President Cyril Ramaphosa drawing a line in the sand to end state capture and rebuild constitutional governance, economic growth and service delivery. Sure, the president might have been sent by the country, but has he come back with anything? I mean, where are we then in terms of economic growth and service delivery? We're now stuck with load shedding, with high levels of unemployment, a country grappling power failures, instability in metro departments, water cuts, corruption, the list goes on. Now, the nation waits in anticipation for the State of the Nation address by President Ramaphosa tomorrow to see if he can inspire confidence to millions of South Africans. Join us now to unpack further his political and economic analyst Khaya Sithole and Wits University economist Dr Lumkile Mondi. Gentlemen, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to The Full View.
Thank you, and good evening to the viewers.
Good evening, Khaya. Good evening to the viewers. Thank you for having us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Great having you this afternoon, gentlemen. I'm going to start with you, Khaya. Is there anything to look forward to with the State of the Nation address by President?
The fashion will be good. That's about it. Look, I think obviously we do have to acknowledge that a State of the Nation address still remains an important moment for the country to reflect on what's working and what isn't working well. Our great tragedy is that unfortunately a lot of the things aren't working very well. And I think if you remember where we were last year, the last time he delivered a State of the Nation address, we were merely days away from the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. And that has, of course, created new problems in that you then saw the cost of living crisis that then became a problem throughout the rest of the year. That then led to the Reserve Bank in South Africa having to respond in the only way it knows how, by hiking interest rates, which has really made the cost of living even more untenable. So that was the one problem that we hadn't foreseen by the time we had the State of the Nation last year. It's also been very clear that since then, we've had the deepest and most protected, elevated stages of load shedding that we've ever seen. And of course, what that has meant is that everything that we had been promised last year has really been curtailed or has really been compromised by the fact that we cannot even guarantee energy supply in this country. So it's not a very good scorecard. It hasn't been a very good year for the president in terms of governance. So it'll be very difficult for him to set a story that indicates that things have been much better than what we've actually seen.
Dr. Mondi, the big question perhaps is, has the president inspired confidence to millions of South Africans in the past? Will he inspire such confidence tomorrow?
Well, I mean, what is done, surprisingly, is deregulating of the energy generation sector, where we're seeing a massive investment coming through private sector players to try and supplement and complement Eskom's generation capacity. So we are very hopeful that in the next 2 years, at least we should improve in terms of our energy generation capacity because he overstepped the RP 2019 as well as the Minister Mantashe's reluctance of opening up that market. So going forward, I'm hoping tomorrow going forward, he's going to speed up or talk about speeding up the transmission company, which is a critical company wholly owned by the state that will be driving investment on transmission to allow new technologies to connect, whether it's battery technologies, and other forms of technologies that can absorb low voltage capacities that will be coming through. So that is done very well. However, it does not take away the continuous destruction of infrastructure, the rising cost of living that Khaya has talked to, and that many South Africans are in a far worse position than they were in comparison to last February due to the falling state capacity of policing, the falling infrastructure, and really the unwillingness of various government structures to do what constitutional are mandated to, whether it's local level, provincial level, and of course national level. So life for an ordinary South African is getting worse and worse by every day that passes under an ANC government.
Now, Khaya, the economy is not performing well. We still see high levels of unemployment. The Eskom debate on coal or renewables or even a straight outline plan from government still has not come out. Is there an end in sight?
Unfortunately not. And I think obviously we have now had to make peace with the fact that the resolution to the energy crisis is not something that can be addressed in the short term. We do know that there's a minister who keeps alleging that all of this can be addressed within 6 months, but obviously one always has to ask, if this could be addressed within 6 months, why has that minister not sold that solution to his fellow cabinet colleagues and the president himself? So it's very difficult to take anyone seriously who seeks to underplay the severity of the crisis. And I think what people are hoping to hear is a simple question of, now that you've seen how damaging this energy crisis has been, not only to the country and to the economy, but also to your own party's electoral prospects, surely you must have found a different way of addressing this particular crisis. What the president will do is that he will sell to us the idea that, look, I've got a national energy crisis committee that's been working together. I've managed to lift the cap on generation so that whoever is capable of generating their own electricity can do so. But after all of that has been said and done, the reality is that, and many more citizens won't even be able to tune into the speech because there will still be load shedding. So despite his best intentions, everything that is going to mention as the steps that have been undertaken to address the energy crisis have not addressed the energy crisis. The crisis is still here. So whether those measures need to be accelerated, whether things need to be done differently, that's what people are waiting to hear. There's also the question of, now that the ANC has played with the idea of declaring this a state of disaster, what does that all mean? And unfortunately, if it does declare state of disaster, it will be selling us yet another pipe dream, because it is difficult to imagine that there's anything that the state will be able to do differently simply by making that particular declaration that they've been able to do up until now. So it's yet again it's another red herring.
Yeah. Dr. Mondi, let's now talk about the government's focus on professionalizing the state as well as the private sector to, of course, raise competency levels to be able to achieve the progress that's required. I mean, the DA's challenge of the ANC's cadre deployment policy comes to mind, with arguments being made and stating that the implementation of such a cadre deployment policy by the ANC is an attempt to centralize democratic powers within the ruling party. Should it blame such a policy for the country's ills, or is it simply governance failure?
I don't think there's anything wrong about the policy. It's about the caliber of individuals that you deploy. I think every political party, because it's given a mandate by the electorate, has got the right to put all resources that it has to public use. So I don't have an issue about cadre deployment. What I do have is the caliber of individuals. We know, and we know, I think between me and Khaya, know quite a number of black professionals who have been taken out of the state, whose career has been deployed, and have been substituted by really low qualified, incompetent ANC cadres whose mandate was really to participate in looting out state resources for the political elite. And some of them saw at the ZONDO Commission, where they're approving things that they had side off, but signing anyway because of political mandates and the instruction that come from there. So I think we know that the ANC has now very weak cadres among itself, and more importantly, it's all the decisions made, whether it's deploying cadres at Transnet, have deepened the crisis in the transport and logistics sector. So across many areas where the state has got mandate and control of those resources, nothing good has come out of that. So really, I think if the electorate is smart, if South Africans are smart, we know that on the ANC side, there's really nothing much they can do differently. They've run out of their tears. They've run out of personnel. So it's about time, I think, the call for South Africans is about time for them to think deeply about the ANC itself as a political party, given that really there's nothing better that can operate. I think it's time for us to look at alternatives, to look at people that have the ability, that have ideas, who can address these challenges.
And I suppose it is the ANC's time and opportunity to think deeply on how well they can convince the public that they have what it takes to steer this ship to, the direction that we all aspire to. Now, Khaya, we have an $8.5 billion commitment from Western countries to assist us in the work that we need to do to generate cleaner energy for the future. Now, this is way above the 140 billion rand in grants and concessional loans that are far cheaper than the open market borrowing that we currently do. So what do you suggest should be done with this kind of money in terms of advancing economic transformation?
Well, remember when South Africa went to Glasgow for, I think it was COP27, and they emerged with this particular commitments.
Yes.
It was on the back of this worldwide consensus that, look, we must go full steam ahead with the transition towards net zero. Said what that would have happened in Glasgow at the end of 2021. And then quite ironically, when 2022 happened and the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, exposed just how fragile European countries in particular were to the supply of gas from Russian oil, you then saw those very same countries actually reverting back to fossil fuel-based, oil production, which simply means that South Africa then suddenly looked like an outlier where we had been persuaded to pursue a particular course of action. And then the very same countries that had made that persuasion then said, well, actually, we have a primary responsibility to our own citizens. And if it turns out that we cannot access Russian oil, we're going to revert back to fossil fuels, which I found remarkably pretentious. The problem with South Africa is that we do have this tendency of being quite reactive in trying to decide how we want to run our own affairs. So when we then asked for these particular loans and this particular financial commitments, we made the commitment that we are actually going to facilitate a transition using those particular resources. Now, what we've also seen as a problem is that there is a tension point in South Africa where we do not know how fast or how speedily this transition needs to be undertaken in light of our high dependency on the fossil economy, whether you look at the coal beds in Mpumalanga or the attendant value chains. So I think South Africa still hasn't actually found an answer to what it wants to do and how to do it. If we receive these particular loans, it's going to create particular difficulties because then we're going to have to then say, look, we've taken this amount of money, so therefore this is what we're committing to do. But we run the risk of actually leaving our own citizens behind and everyone saying that, well, we seem to be committed to meeting the demands of these external investors without actually coming up with a solution that says, how do we balance our pathway through the transition and also protect our existing jobs, particularly within the fossil economy, because we cannot afford to lose any more jobs.
All right, gentlemen, I mean, we need a whole hour just given the depth of the problems that we find ourselves in. But unfortunately, time is not our side this evening. But we do thank your time this evening. We do appreciate your sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was political and economic analyst Khaya Sithole and Wits University economist Dr. Lumkile Mondi just sharing with us, their thoughts as a preview to the State of the Nation address that will be delivered by President Cyril Ramaphosa tomorrow.